Ethan had always loved quiet places. They felt like a refuge from the world outside, a world that seemed too loud, too demanding, and often too lonely. That afternoon, the small bookstore on the corner of Maple Street felt like the only space that understood him. Its shelves were crammed with stories that had been forgotten by time, with worn pages that smelled like nostalgia and possibility all at once. He wandered slowly down the aisles, fingers brushing against spines that told stories of love and heartbreak, adventure and loss. It was a comforting ritual, one he had repeated countless times since moving to the city. People often asked him why he didn't make more friends, why he spent so much time alone. But Ethan never had a clear answer. Perhaps he wasn't lonely in the conventional sense, he simply felt that most people didn't see the same colors he did, didn't hear the same music in the small moments of life. As he paused near a shelf of poetry books, a faint sound of footsteps made him look up. She was there. Claire Dot, she moved with a quiet grace, the kind that drew attention without asking for it. Ethan had noticed her weeks ago, every time she entered the bookstore. She was easy to overlook at first glance, not striking in a way that demanded stares. But there was something in the calmness of her presence that lingered in his mind long after she left. Her hair, the soft chestnut color of autumn leaves, framed a face that carried both gentleness and a hint of melancholy. That day, she seemed distracted, as if her mind were somewhere far away. She reached for a book on the top shelf, stretching on tiptoe, and Ethan noticed how her fingers barely grazed the edge. Without thinking, he stepped closer, instinctively, to offer help. His hand hovered over the book for just a moment, almost touching it before she looked down and their eyes met. It was not an electric shock. Not the kind of instant attraction stories always made it out to be. It was quieter, subtler, the kind of connection that whispered instead of shouted. He saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, as though she knew, somehow, that he was someone who might understand. Ethan cleared his throat and offered the book. "Here, I think this might be the one you're trying to reach." Claire smiled softly, and for a brief second, the bookstore felt warmer, lighter, as though the air itself had shifted. "Thank you," she said, her voice gentle and hesitant, yet filled with an unspoken depth. She took the book and glanced at him as if debating whether to say more. Ethan, who was used to being invisible in the background of other people's lives, felt a sudden surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something that didn't feel forced or awkward. Maybe it was the start of a story that had been waiting for both of them without their knowing. After she turned and walked down the aisle, Ethan found himself watching her back disappear behind a tall row of shelves. He couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. What stories had brought her to this quiet little bookstore on this quiet little afternoon? And then, almost without realizing it, he heard himself whispering to the empty air around him, "I hope she comes back." It was strange how a single moment could stir so much inside him. For years, he had moved through life in careful steps, avoiding disappointment, keeping his heart tucked away like a fragile book. But something about Claire made him want to risk opening it. If only a little, hours passed, the store grew quieter, and Ethan moved through his routine, arranging shelves and tidying stacks, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought of the curve of her smile, the soft determination in her eyes, and the simple kindness in the way she accepted his help. He wondered if she noticed how different he felt when she was near, if she sensed the quiet longing that had been part of him for as long as he could remember. By the time the last customer had left, the sun was dipping below the rooftops, casting a warm golden glow through the front windows. Ethan stood behind the counter, staring at the door where Claire had exited. He didn't know if he would see her again tomorrow, or next week, or ever, but he felt with surprising clarity that this bookstore and perhaps his life would never feel quite the same without her presence. That evening, as he closed the shop and stepped out into the crisp evening air, Ethan felt a strange mix of longing and anticipation. Something was about to change. He knew it, though he couldn't see how. And in the quiet hope that fluttered inside him, he felt a story beginning, one that was his, hers, and perhaps theirs together, unfolding in small, meaningful moments, like the soft turning of a page in a favorite book. And that was how it all began. The next morning, the city was quiet in that gentle, almost magical way mornings sometimes are after a light drizzle. Ethan arrived at the bookstore early, as he always did, and the familiar scent of paper and dust wrapped around him like an old, comforting blanket. He liked mornings best, when the store was empty and the world outside hadn't yet rushed forward. He found himself thinking about Claire, as he often did now. He remembered how her hand had brushed the spine of the book he handed her yesterday, and how her smile had lingered longer than politeness required. It wasn't just a passing thought. It was a feeling that seemed to anchor him in place, that made the hours stretch and the air feel heavier in a way he didn't quite understand. Claire had been part of his world for only a few weeks, but Ethan felt as though he had known her far longer. There was something familiar in the way she moved, the quiet thoughtfulness she carried in her gestures, as if she carried memories too heavy to speak aloud. He often wondered what her story was, what brought her to this corner of the city, and why she seemed both so present and yet so distant at the same time. When she returned that afternoon, as if reading his thoughts, Ethan noticed the small things that made her who she was: the soft way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the careful attention she gave to each book she picked up, the quiet hum she made when she read a line that struck her. To anyone else it would have seemed ordinary, but Ethan saw the world in small, intimate details, and these little moments were becoming the pieces of a story he wished he could understand fully. "Morning, Ethan," Claire said, her voice gentle, almost hesitant. She held a thin notebook under her arm, its corners worn. "I brought something I thought you might like." Ethan smiled, curious. She placed the notebook on the counter and opened it to a page filled with neatly written lines of poetry. He recognized a few of the authors, but many were new to him. "These are beautiful," he said softly. "Did you write some of these yourself?" She nodded, a faint blush rising in her cheeks. "Few. I've always liked writing when I need to sort through things. Sometimes words make sense where life doesn't." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he felt the weight of her unspoken history. It wasn't just that she had a past, it was that her past had shaped her so delicately, with scars and joys hidden in equal measure. He realized that she wasn't just searching for books. She was searching for comfort, for understanding, for someone who might notice the little pieces of her that others often overlooked. As the afternoon wore on, they talked more openly. Claire shared memories of a small town she had grown up in, a place where everyone knew each other's stories, and yet she had always felt slightly apart. She spoke of her favorite teacher, the long walks by the lake, the secret hiding spots she had as a child where she would read or write for hours. Ethan listened intently, realizing how much of who she was had been shaped quietly, patiently, by moments that might seem insignificant to anyone else. In turn, he shared parts of his own story, the way he had moved to the city after college, seeking a fresh start, a life that felt more his own. He told her about his love for books, not just for the stories, but for the way they held memories of the people who read them before him. He remembered the small bookstore in his hometown where he had spent hours lost in novels, and how he had always hoped one day to find someone who understood the same quiet pleasures. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink, leaving just the two of them amidst the rows of books. There was a silence that was comfortable, filled with meaning rather than emptiness. It was in this silence that Ethan realized the bond they were forming was built not on grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but on the careful, patient exchange of stories, memories, and small shared moments of trust. Yet, even as their connection deepened, Ethan couldn't ignore the distance that lingered. Claire had moments when her gaze drifted out the window, as if seeing something far away, and Ethan felt the invisible walls she kept around herself. He didn't press her, but he sensed the subtle barriers, memories of past hurts, a fear of being misunderstood, a need to protect herself until she was ready to trust. And perhaps that was what made the moments they shared so precious. Each smile, each word, each quiet glance across the shelves was a small victory against the solitude they both carried. It was a bond that grew quietly, like moss over stone, not loud or flashy, but strong enough to hold even in the face of past sorrows. By the time Claire left that evening, the sunlight fading behind the rooftops, Ethan felt an ache in his chest, not sadness, but the bittersweet awareness of longing. They were both walking carefully through unspoken feelings, fragile histories, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find something new together without losing themselves in the process. As he locked the door, the first signs of spring had begun to creep into the city. The gray of winter softened into pale greens, and the air smelled faintly of rain and new beginnings. Ethan hadn't seen Claire in a week, though she had promised she would stop by when she had a free afternoon. His days had become routine, again sorting books, tidying shelves, and lingering over the corners of pages he'd read 100 times before, but there was a quiet anticipation that clung to him like a secret. He was arranging a display near the front window when the bell above the door chimed. He looked up instinctively, heart skipping. And there she was, Claire, standing in the doorway, holding a small paper bag in her hands. "Hi, Ethan," she said, a little breathless, as though she had hurried to get there. Her eyes sparkled in the afternoon light, and for a moment he forgot how to speak. "Claire, you came," he said, managing a smile. Though his chest felt tight with sudden excitement, she nodded, looking slightly hesitant. "I was walking by, and I thought, maybe I could see you for a minute. Wasn't much, just a few minutes." But in that instant, it felt as though time itself had shifted. The world outside the city, the noise, the hurried footsteps of strangers melted away, leaving only the quiet intimacy of the bookstore. Ethan gestured toward the counter. "Come on in. Did you find something interesting?" She placed the paper bag carefully on the counter and opened it. Inside were a few old postcards and letters, some dating back decades. "I found these at a little antique shop," she said. "They reminded me of stories. Real stories. I thought maybe you'd like them." He picked up a postcard, tracing the faded handwriting with his finger. The words weren't important. They were fragments of lives long past, but something about them felt alive, as if they were whispering the emotions of someone long gone. "This is amazing," he said softly. "It's like holding someone else's memories in your hands." Claire smiled, but her eyes were thoughtful. "Sometimes I feel like stories can find us when we need them the most." Ethan looked at her, seeing for the first time the quiet intensity in her gaze. Something had changed in her since the last time they had spoken. She seemed more present, more willing to step into the moments that mattered. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to Ethan, it was everything. As they examined the letters together, small accident accrued a letter slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. Instinctively, Ethan bent down to pick it up. Their hands brushed for the briefest instant. He felt the electricity of connection in that simple, fleeting contact. Neither pulled away. Neither spoke. For a heartbeat, it was as though the world had stopped moving, leaving only the two of them and the silent acknowledgement of the feelings that had quietly been growing between them. Claire looked up, her cheeks faintly pink. I didn't mean to. You didn't?" Ethan interrupted gently, still holding the letter between them. It's fine." The air was charged with something unspoken, something delicate and profound. Ethan realized then that even small, seemingly accidental moments could hold the power to bring buried emotions back to the surface. He had spent weeks waiting for a sign, for an opportunity to connect with her. And now fate, or perhaps coincidence, had handed it to him. They spent the next hour flipping through the postcards and letters, sharing guesses about the lives behind them. Claire laughed softly at a note from the 1940s, imagining a young couple exchanging secret promises. Ethan felt himself drawn to her laughter, the way it seemed to echo off the shelves, filling the bookstore with warmth. At one point, Claire paused, looking at a postcard with a sepia photograph of a city street. "I feel like every story, every memory eventually finds its way to the right person," she said. Her voice was gentle, almost wistful, yet filled with certainty. Ethan looked into her eyes, seeing the vulnerability and the hope intertwined. Maybe some stories are meant to meet at exactly the right time, he said. Maybe some connections are inevitable. Claire smiled softly, and for a moment there was a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had been left unsaid between them. No words were needed to convey the depth of their feelings. It was in the shared silence, the lingering glances, the gentle movements across the floor. As she finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Thank you for today, Ethan," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that lingered long after she stepped outside. Ethan watched her go, a strange mixture of longing and hope stirring within him. That small, seemingly ordinary afternoon had shifted something deep inside him. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a bold declaration, it was the quiet, persistent truth of connection. Sometimes he realized love wasn't about grand gestures. It wasn't about rushing forward or making proclamations. It was about noticing, being present, and allowing the small moments, fate, coincidence, gentle touches, shared stories to guide to hearts toward each other. And as Ethan returned to the counter, the sunlight fading through the windows, he felt a sense of anticipation. Something had been rekindled, something delicate and beautiful. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he understood now that some connections, no matter how long dormant, were never truly lost, and for the first time in weeks, he felt certain that their story was only just beginning. The bookstore was quieter than usual that evening. The sun had begun to dip low, casting long golden shadows across the shelves and floor. Ethan stood behind the counter, absent-mindedly straightening a stack of books, though his mind was far from the task at hand. He kept replaying the moments from earlier in the day. The way Claire had lingered over the postcards and letters. The way her laughter had filled the room like sunlight spilling into a dark corner. He had wanted to say something. Anything. In the moment. Something to convey the quiet way his heart seemed to respond to hers. But he hadn't. Fear held him back, not fear of rejection, exactly, but the fear of changing the delicate balance of what they already had. Some things, he thought, were too fragile to speak aloud. Then the bell above the door chimed. He looked up, and there she was again, standing with her coat draped over her arm, eyes searching. The sight of her made his chest tighten in a way that was almost painful, but also profoundly tender. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, stepping inside. The faintest smile touched her lips, yet there was a hesitation in her eyes. It's the kind that spoke of unspoken truths. "Claire," he managed, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." She moved to the poetry section, trailing her fingers along the spines as if looking for comfort in familiar words. "I wanted to," she admitted after a pause, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are things I've been thinking about, and I needed to see you." Ethan swallowed hard, aware that his own thoughts mirrored hers. There were things he had wanted to say for weeks, emotions he had carefully tucked away, afraid that speaking them would make them real and irreversible. But in the quiet of the bookstore, with her standing just a few feet away, he realized that silence could no longer hold the weight of his feelings. He moved closer, though not too close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence without pressure. "I've been thinking about you too," he said gently. "More than I probably should admit." Her gaze met his, steady and searching. I've been afraid," she confessed. "Afraid that my past, the mistakes I've made, the things I carry, that they would keep someone like you away." Ethan shook his head slowly, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "It's not about the past, Claire. None of that changes what I feel. What matters is now, this moment, right here." She looked down, fiddling with the edge of a book in her hands. "But words can't always fix things. And actions. Actions don't always mean what you hope they will." He understood. He had felt the same hesitation, the same worry that speaking aloud could disrupt the careful rhythm they had built. Yet, as he watched her struggle with the invisible weight of unspoken fears, he realized that silence was no longer enough. "Claire," said softly, "I don't need words to prove anything. I just need you to know that you matter. More than I can explain. And whatever comes next, I want to face it with you." Her eyes lifted to meet his, glistening with emotion. There was a moment of stillness, a pause where the air itself seemed to hold its breath. In that instant, every unspoken word between them, the longing, the hesitation, the quiet ache of emotions kept hidden, was laid bare in their shared gaze. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted, her voice breaking just slightly. But being here with you, it feels right. Somehow, even if I'm scared. Ethan nodded, his own chest heavy with relief and emotion. We don't have to rush anything, he said. We just take it one step at a time. That's all I'm asking. They moved together to the window, standing side by side as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The world outside continued its rush, unaware of the quiet, profound moment unfolding in the small bookstore. Neither spoke for a long while. Words weren't needed. Their proximity, the shared glances, the gentle awareness of each other's presence. It said everything that words could not. Ethan thought about how many times he had imagined this moment. And yet it was even more beautiful in reality. There was vulnerability here, yes, and a hint of fear, but there was also honesty. A truth that neither of them had dared to express until now. Finally, Claire let out. The late afternoon sun had begun to fade, and a soft chill crept into the bookstore as the city outside prepared for evening. Ethan was tidying the shelves near the poetry section when the bell above the door chimed softly. He looked up instinctively, his heart catching Claire was standing there. Her coat slightly damp from the light rain outside. Hi, she said, her voice quiet but steady. She held a small leather-bound journal in her hands. Ethan noticed the way her fingers clutched it, as though it carried pieces of herself she wasn't ready to share completely. Claire, he breathed, moving toward her. You came. She nodded, a faint tension in her shoulders that Ethan had come to recognize over the past weeks. I needed to talk, she said. I can't keep holding everything inside anymore. Something in her tone, in the slight quiver of her voice, made Ethan pause. He realized that this was the moment they had both been circling around, the moment where unspoken feelings could no longer remain silent, then talk. He said softly, I'm listening. Claire opened the journal slowly, flipping to a page marked by a folded corner. I'd been writing, she admitted. Not because I needed anyone to read it, but because I needed to understand myself. And I think I understand now that I can't let fear keep me from something real. Ethan's chest tightened. He could feel the weight of her words, the careful honesty, the vulnerability she was offering. You don't have to be afraid here, he said. Not with me. She took a deep breath, glancing down at the journal before looking back at him. I've been holding back, thinking I wasn't ready for someone else's heart. That maybe I'd only hurt myself or someone else. But seeing you, spending time with you, listening to you, it's changed something. I like you, Ethan, more than I thought I could allow myself to feel. The words hung in the air between them, tender and powerful all at once. Ethan felt a rush of emotion, relief, joy, and a quiet awe at the bravery it took for her to speak so openly. He stepped a little closer, careful not to overwhelm her, letting the silence fill the space with understanding. Claire, he said softly, his voice steady despite the storm of feeling inside him. I've been feeling the same way. I didn't know how to say it or if it was the right time. But I like you too. I think about you constantly, and I want to be here with you, not just in moments like these, but in every small part of life we can share. Her eyes glistened, a mixture of tears and relief shimmering in the soft light. I didn't know if I could ever say that, she admitted, but it feels right now, and I don't want to let this slip away. Ethan reached out tentatively, resting his hand near hers on the edge of the counter. Close enough to connect, but still gentle, giving her space. You won't, he whispered. I promise. Whatever comes, we face it together. A quiet calm settled over them, but it was a calm full of meaning. Months of longing, hesitation, and unspoken emotions had led to this single moment of truth. Every glance, every smile, every small shared memory between them had built toward this point. And now the words were finally out, spoken with honesty and care. Claire leaned slightly closer, not out of urgency, but in quiet acknowledgement. "I've been so afraid of being vulnerable," she confessed, "but I feel like I can trust you. I feel like maybe this could be something real." Ethan's heart swelled. He felt the unspoken threads of their connection, weeks of quiet moments. Shared stories and lingering glances solidify into something tangible, something they both could hold on to. "It is real," he said simply, "and it's ours to build." They spent the next hour in the quiet warmth of the bookstore, speaking softly about small dreams, hopes, and the little things they enjoyed about life. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies often portray confessions. It was quieter, more profound, like a gentle current beneath the surface that had finally risen to meet them. As the sun dipped fully behind the buildings, casting the store in golden shadow, Ethan realized that everything that had kept them apart, fear, hesitation, unspoken histories, had melted away in the light of honesty. They didn't need grand gestures or proclamations. The truth of their feelings, spoken with care and patience, was enough to change everything. Finally, Claire closed her journal and tucked it under her arm, a soft smile on her lips. "Thank you for listening," she said, her voice steady now, full of warmth. "And thank you for speaking," Ethan replied, his own smile reflecting the depth of emotion he felt. "It's been worth the wait." They lingered for a moment longer, side by side, feeling the quiet reassurance of connection and trust. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the small, profound shift that had occurred inside the bookstore. But inside, two hearts had finally spoken their truth, and the turning point of their story had arrived, quiet, tender, and unforgettable. Sometimes the days that followed felt different, though the world around them hadn't changed. Ethan and Claire moved through their routines with a new awareness of each other, quiet reassurance that their unspoken bond had finally been acknowledged. The bookstore, once simply a place of work and comfort, now carried the weight of shared moments, laughter, and whispered thoughts. Ethan noticed the small ways Claire's presence brightened the space. She organized books with her gentle care, leaving little notes tucked between pages for customers to discover. She smiled more easily now, her earlier hesitation softened by the quiet certainty that they had found something worth protecting. For his part, Ethan felt lighter, as if months of silent longing had finally been transformed into something tangible, something that could grow without fear. One afternoon, they found themselves standing by the window, watching raindrops slide lazily down the glass. Outside, the city moved as it always did, oblivious to the quiet transformations taking place inside the little bookstore. Inside, however, there was a calm and steady warmth between them, a sense that whatever challenges life might bring, they would face them together. "I keep thinking about those postcards," Claire said softly, her eyes tracing the patterns of the rain. "It's funny how stories from long ago can still feel so relevant, like they were waiting for someone to notice them." Ethan smiled, feeling the depth of her thoughtfulness. "I think some stories, maybe the best ones, are the ones that wait for the right people, just like us." She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made him feel at home. "I like that," she said. "It feels hopeful." They spent hours talking, sometimes about books, sometimes about life, and sometimes about nothing at all. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people who had discovered a rare connection and were learning how to nurture it. Every glance, every shared silence, every smile carried meaning, building the foundation of a relationship that was quiet but strong, delicate but enduring. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons began to change. Spring gave way to summer, and the little bookstore remained a sanctuary for both of them. They celebrated small victories together, a book found for a customer, a poem finally written and shared, a quiet afternoon spent laughing over an inside joke. The world outside could be chaotic, but inside, amidst the stacks of books and whispered stories, they had created a space of understanding and care. One evening, as the golden light of sunset poured through the windows, Ethan and Claire stood side by side near the poetry section, holding a book together. He looked at her and she looked at him, And in that shared moment, they didn't need words to express what they felt. The months of longing, hesitation, and careful discovery had brought them to this point, a quiet, enduring love that didn't demand drama or grandeur, only honesty, patience, and presence. "Do you ever think about what brought us here?" Claire asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Ethan replied. "Every small choice, every moment we didn't speak, every glance we shared. It all led us to this, and I wouldn't change a thing." She smiled, the kind of smile that carries relief, joy, and trust all at once. "Neither would I," she said. "It feels like home." They lingered there for a moment, letting the bookstore wrap them in its quiet embrace. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle as night approached, but inside, time seemed to slow. There was a sense of completion, not the end of a story, but the start of a chapter that felt secure, steady, and real. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, though filled with certainty. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. No more hesitation, no more unspoken fears, just us." Claire nodded, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "Together," she agreed, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and quiet joy. The bookstore felt alive with the gentle rhythm of their connection. Each book on the shelves seemed to hum with possibility, each story a reflection of the life they were beginning to write together. And in that space, amidst the quiet corners and the familiar scent of paper and ink, Ethan and Claire knew that love didn't always need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes it was in the small, steady moments, shared smiles, gentle conversations, and the patience to let hearts grow at their own pace. As night fell and the city outside settled into its own quiet rhythm, they turned to leave the store together. Their steps were slow, unhurried, carrying the weight of unspoken gratitude and the lightness of newfound happiness. The door closed behind them with a soft click, sealing the moment. But the warmth lines thing isn't rushing forward, it's speaking the truth when the moment is right.